Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Last Christmas, my wife Sarah and I bought one of our 10-year-old daughter Emma's Santa gifts from a popular UK sports retailer that also has many stores here in Ireland. It was a high-tech basketball hoop with an automatic ball return system. We purchased it from their Irish website and didn't think twice about it. A week later, we got a notification from a courier company with brown uniforms that there were customs charges due on something. We'd bought so many things for the kids that we had to double-check our orders. We couldn't find anything that was being imported, so we assumed it was a scam. I told Sarah to call the company and find out who shipped it. "It's from a UK-based carrier," she said after hanging up. "I think it's our basketball hoop." After some digging, we confirmed it was indeed our order. They had shipped it from the UK via a local carrier to the brown uniformed guys for delivery to us. Sarah and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost €60 when you're on a fixed income is tough, especially during the holidays. "Just pay it," I told her. "I'll deal with the retailer." The first day I called, I had to dial 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 30 minutes each time. I remained patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people were just doing their job. I asked to speak to a manager and was promised a call back each time, but it never happened. The second day was similar. By the third day, I was starting to lose my cool. I called back, waited even longer on hold, and finally decided I'd had enough. "Look," I said to the rep, "all I want is the €60 back. Our consumer rights in Ireland state that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase at the very latest by the final checkout screen. There was nothing to show that in this case." "I understand, sir," the rep replied, sounding indifferent. "Let me see what I can do to help." What he said next sent me over the edge. "We can offer you a €25 gift voucher to use on our website," he said. Then he read a statement. "We advise our customers that there may be DDU charges on any item shipped outside of the UK." "Where exactly does it state this information?" I asked. There was a pause. I don't actually know," he admitted. "Well, I know one thing," I said, my voice rising. "It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction. I've checked. This is a violation of my consumer rights, and I'm going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next hour, or I'm going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn and tag every senior officer in your company." I hung up and waited. No call came. The next day, I followed through on my promise. I created a LinkedIn post detailing what they had done, how they stuck us with hidden charges, and how they were ignoring our requests for a manager. I tagged every senior officer at that company, from regional managers to European directors, all the way up to the CEO. "This," I wrote, "is now an act of war." Shortly after I posted, I noticed they took down the item from their website. They must have thought I was a simpleton who doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for basketball hoop on their site, it still showed the item. I took a screenshot of that, then another of the now missing item page. I even did a Google cached search and found a version from 3 days prior showing the item. I added a comment to my original post highlighting their attempt to hide the evidence, complete with screenshots. I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again. The post started gaining traction. 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I took a screenshot of these mysterious visitors and added another comment, trolling them for their incompetence. The next morning, I got a call from a senior exec at their head office in the UK. "Mr. O'Brien," she said, her voice dripping with apology. "I'm Jennifer from corporate. What can we do to make this right?" "Originally, I just wanted my €60 back," I replied. "But since I had to go to such lengths to get your attention, now I want my €60 back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I want to keep the product. That's the only thing that will make this go away." She asked for a couple of hours to sort it out. About an hour later, she called back. "Mr. O'Brien, I've processed the €60 refund to your PayPal account," she said. "I've also issued a full refund for the purchase, and you can keep the product. Again, we're truly sorry for the inconvenience." I thanked her for her help because at that stage I was just happy it was over. But I'll be damned if I'll let anyone walk all over my family, even if they're a £70 million annual company. The moral of the story is, don't take nonsense from anyone. I may be just one man, but my daughter's view of Santa is far more valuable to me than the opinion of some retail chain that doesn't care about its customers or how it operates ethically. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be caught up in a legal battle with my neighbors, but here I am. It all started when I moved into my dream home on the outskirts of town. The property came with a beautiful old barn that I planned to restore. Little did I know, this barn would become the center of a ridiculous dispute. About a month after moving in, I got a knock on my door. It was Karen, the president of the local homeowners association. She had a fake smile plastered on her face as she introduced herself. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Karen, the homeowners association president. I'm here to give you your welcome packet and go over some of our rules." I took the thick binder she handed me and flipped through it. "Thanks, but I'm not part of the homeowners association. The previous owner opted out, and I plan to keep it that way." Karen's smile faltered for a second before she recovered. "Oh, but everyone in the neighborhood is part of the homeowners association. It's required." "Not for my property," I said firmly. "I checked before buying. Have a nice day." I tried to close the door, but Karen stuck her foot in the way. "Wait, we really need to discuss that eyesore of a barn. It's bringing down property values." "The barn stays," I said. "It's on my property, and I'm restoring it." Karen's fake smile disappeared completely. "We'll see about that," she snapped before storming off. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was busy with work and spent my weekends slowly fixing up the barn. It was a big project, but I enjoyed the work. A few weeks later, I came home from a business trip to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the Homeowners Association, demanding that I remove the dilapidated structure on my property within 30 days or face fines. I crumpled up the notice and tossed it in the trash. They had no authority over my property, and I wasn't about to let them bully me. The next day, Karen showed up again with 2 other Homeowners Association board members in tow. "Did you get our notice?" she demanded. "I did, and I'm ignoring it," I replied. "You have no jurisdiction here." "We most certainly do," Karen huffed. "That barn is an eyesore and a safety hazard. It needs to come down immediately." I stood my ground. The barn stays. End of discussion. For the next few weeks, I got daily notices and visits from various homeowners association members. They threatened fines, legal action, even calling the city to report code violations. I documented everything and consulted a lawyer friend who assured me they had no legal standing. I thought things had finally died down when the notices and visits stopped. I should have known better. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery. I looked out my window to see a bulldozer heading straight for my barn. I ran outside in my pajamas, yelling at the top of my lungs, "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" The bulldozer kept going, smashing into the side of the barn. I could see Karen standing off to the side with a triumphant smirk on her face. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, half the barn was already destroyed. The officers made the workers stop, but the damage was done. Karen sauntered over, that smug look still on her face. "Oops, looks like that unsafe structure had to come down after all. Don't worry, the Homeowners Association will split the cost of removal with you." I was shaking with rage. "This is destruction of property. I'm pressing charges and suing you personally, as well as the entire Homeowners Association." Karen just laughed. "Good luck with that. We have an excellent lawyer." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal action. I hired the best property lawyer I could find and went after Karen and the Homeowners Association with everything I had. The case was pretty clear-cut. My property wasn't part of the Homeowners Association, and even if it had been, they had no right to destroy my barn without proper procedures. We also discovered that Karen had forged documents claiming my property was part of the Homeowners Association and used Homeowners Association funds to pay for the demolition without board approval. In the end, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. The Homeowners Association was ordered to pay for the full restoration of my barn, plus damages. Karen was removed from the board and faced criminal charges for fraud and destruction of property. The best part? The judge also ruled that the Homeowners Association had to disband completely due to their illegal actions. My neighbors were thrilled to be free of Karen's tyranny. It took almost a year, but my barn was finally restored to its former glory. Every time I look at it now, I'm reminded that it pays to stand up to bullies, even when they come in the form of nosy neighbors with clipboards. As for Karen, last I heard she was trying to start up an homeowners association in the next town over. I almost feel sorry for her new neighbors. Almost. The next one is a petty revenge story. My kid's mother, my ex, is a control freak. We have shared care, weak about arrangements. She demands to know her daughter's every movement, texts constantly, checking up on her and a load of other overbearing nonsense. One of the reasons I left her also. My daughter is now well into her teens and fed up with the control. The ex tries to track her via various apps on my daughter's phone, however my daughter is savvy enough to disable this when she wants. So we went camping for a week in the summer with my new partner and her kids. I told the ex exactly where we were camping and our planned travel route. My daughter had had enough of the control and texts and turned off her phone as we left for the trip. We had to detour a bit due to roadworks, and soon I got a text from the ex demanding to know where we were going and why our daughter wasn't responding. I was surprised she knew we were off track a bit. Once we get to camp, we go looking and sure enough find an AirTag hidden in my daughter's bag. Both myself and my daughter were pretty unimpressed and almost dumped it in the garbage. Instead, we decided to have some fun. We were camping in a small town with a post office. We bought a large potato on which my daughter drew an angry face. Put the AirTag and the potato inside a sealed post bag and posted it to her mother. Over the next 6 days of camping, I received a series of increasingly agitated calls and texts from the ex about our whereabouts. She was freaking out as the tag traveled from our remote town, through another state, and slowly back to her address. A week goes by fast and we head home. Dropped the kids off to their mothers and almost forgot about the package as it hadn't arrived, apparently. A few days later, I get an excited call from my daughter who was grounded. The post bag had turned up at least a couple of weeks after sending. The potato had gone bad and turned to a foul-smelling mush in the bag that upon opening had spilled on the living room carpet, leaving a rotten mess with an AirTag in the middle. Even better, it was the ex who opened it. I wish I'd been there to see her face. Apparently, it was worth the grounding. The ex still tries to control and track my kids, but doesn't have much luck. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I had been living in an apartment with 3 other roommates, so 4 of us total, for about 8 months. We are all women in our 20s. I barely interacted with my other roommates at all. Just between our jobs and classes, we never saw each other. We all had our own rooms as well. For some context, on May 5th, my fiancé and I were planning to move into a new apartment together, so by the evening of the 4th, I had just about all of my belongings packed up. More on that later. Though I barely interacted with my roommates, I felt like we coexisted well, and we never fought or argued about anything, except for some very minor instances with Vicky and Kara. Those 2 were friends, and Vicky was definitely the messiest of the 4 of us living there. She would leave her clothes in the dryer for days, pile dishes in the sink for more than a week before cleaning them, and often forget food in the fridge until it would rot. Maybe 5 times throughout my time living there, I would get a text in our group chat from Kara saying something like, "Hey op, I talked to the others and they said the dishes in the sink aren't there, so please clean them." This was annoying, but it happened infrequently enough it wasn't awful, and I figured Vicky lied to Kara about messes since it was just easier to throw me under the bus rather than own up to it herself. On the evening of May 4th, so the night before I was planning to move out, Kara sent a very long and scathing text to our group chat. She went on and on about how she is tired of my messes, hates all my stuff strewn about the apartment, and also personally attacked me, calling me disgusting and inconsiderate. Since I was leaving literally the next day, I didn't see any reason to start a fight, so I just said it was her lucky day, and I was actually moving out the next morning. She replied, "Whatever you say, just take all your stuff and leave." Now, the malicious compliance, as I had mentioned earlier, I had packed most of my belongings already, but technically not everything. The 4 of us all moved into the apartment at about the same date, but I moved in a few days earlier than the others. This means I had bought a lot of the communal items myself. I was planning to leave these out of kindness despite them being worth $400. However, once I got that text from Kara, I decided I would in fact take all of my stuff and leave. These communal items included all trash cans in the whole apartment, $100, the Wi-Fi router, $150, a large metal shelving rack, probably the one that hurt the most, $150. The shelving rack was likely the most devastating loss for them since they had tons of stuff. For reference, the kitchen had 10 cupboards and 8 drawers, of which I used 2 cupboards and 1 drawer to store my items. The cupboards I used were also the ones above the microwave and the fridge since I am the tallest and wanted to be considerate. All the rest of the cupboards, drawers, and the entire metal rack, which had 5 large shelves, were filled to the brim with my roommate's stuff. Essentially, there was absolutely no way they'd be able to fit it in the amount of space I left behind without buying another rack or putting it on the counter and floor. I was careful to keep all their stuff from the rack organized and neat when I removed it, and everything from the rack completely covered the counters, kitchen table, and coffee table in the living room. I moved out peacefully with all my belongings the next day and have been happy in my new apartment with my fiancé. A few days after moving out, Vicky texted in the group chat that, FYI, the Wi-Fi isn't working anymore. I wonder why, and at that point I left the chat. I've wondered how long it took Kara to realize that it actually was never me that was making messes in the apartment, but I guess I'll never know. The next one is an entitled People's Story. So, I am an instructor at a small college. I teach artsy vocational classes and only have an MFA, and my school really favors more academic PhDs. This was all told to me when I was hired, but the dean at the time was incredibly kind about this and gave me a secret boost in pay to make up for the lack of favor. She told me that even though I would never be promoted, my area of expertise was valued, and as long as I stayed in my lane, I was very welcome. So before I ever got tenure, I worked for a few years and developed a slate of very popular classes that filled every semester. I was very happy and grateful to have the job. Titles mean nothing to me, and I was just happy to be successful at a job I loved that helped people. I also learned very quickly never to step on the toes of more senior faculty. I stayed in my lane. Then a woman was hired in another subgroup of my department. I never met her, nor was I involved in her hiring. She had nothing to do with me, but she does have a PhD. Then, before I ever met her, I saw on her social media that she announced that she would soon be teaching all my classes, and she was delighted to be doing that. I was shocked because I went through a rigorous hiring process, and I am exceptionally qualified to teach in my area. She has no publications in my area, and her degrees are only vaguely related to my area. I figured my chair would put her in her place, but I was wrong. Instead, I was called into the chair's office and told EW is very interested in what you do and wants to help you. I stared my chair down. EW has a degree in X, and she was hired to do Y. That doesn't have anything to do with me. Chair sighs. Her degree is multidisciplinary, and she is more than qualified. This shocked me because it was way out of protocol. There was a pecking order, one that I had followed. I also realized very quickly that if I gave in, I would have no job. I would be shunted off to teach stuff I wasn't qualified to teach. This gave me the courage to resist, and resist I did. Multiple meetings with my chair followed, in which I was painted with the difficult and unsupportive. Honestly, if the woman had had one shred of business teaching in my area, I probably would have succumbed to the pressure. But she was not qualified either by degree, experience, or publications. That made me mad. Meanwhile, an older colleague who had been terrible to me and made me cry a few times pulled me aside one day. Apparently, she had grown to respect that I wasn't letting the chair bully me. She told me to never verbalize permission for EW to take over any of my classes. Apparently, the rules of the school were and are that I was the one who decided who could sub for me or take over for me. I held firm. I was bullied over and over again. One time, my chair very nearly physically threatened me and said, "Why can't you just say it?" Chair had no idea I had been tipped off why I needed to say it. I was told by another colleague that EW is bored with her area and doesn't like what she got a degree in, and she only did that area because it's easier to get hired. I said her life choices weren't my problem and stood firm. My chair threatened not to support my tenure, but I actually had a bulletproof application. Chair couldn't do anything. Shunned by many colleagues, some of whom I thought were friends, I was called angry and unreasonable on a good day, a idiot on the worst. One day, the sweet dear lady who had been responsible for hiring EW actually cried an apology saying she was sickened by what was happening to me. EW had been their last choice, and the only person they could get. This sweet, lovely woman wailed that EW was obnoxious and terrible. She also said that many people in the department supported me but were scared of the chair. She said I should just keep resisting. At least twice I was at school events, and when I told the person, both times high-up administrators, what I did/taught, they said, "Oh, I thought EW did that." I had to correct them. So I got tenure and stood firm. Meanwhile, a former student who is now teaching at a community college nearby told me EW was teaching there. He provided me with her bio from their website. Her listed credentials were my credentials. Luckily, that didn't last long. She didn't have the expertise, so I guess the gig just fizzled. One thing I never did was meet with EW. I was asked to, so we could hash things out, and I said repeatedly that there was nothing to hash. I was happy in my job, and my job wasn't her job. I was always polite and professional if I had to deal with her, but I always avoided any potential traps. They wanted my verbal permission. I wouldn't give it. Finally, the chair stepped down. The next chair initially sided with the majority because he didn't know me very well, but then he got to know me and was fair. Eventually, EW stopped trying to do my job. She pushed her way into another area, and now she steers clear of mine. It really did take about 10 years to wear her down, so there was no real dramatic ending. I just held firm, and eventually EW gave up. The reason I am sharing is recently another colleague told me that he always thought EW and Chair were having an affair, and this is why everything happened. Maybe I am naive, but the thought never crossed my mind. Plus, EW is actually not attractive at all, so I couldn't picture it. Anyway, over the years, whenever EW has done anything terrible or stupid, my colleagues will always share it with me. Still, I actually have little ill will left for her. I won most of the battles and the war, and that's good enough. I still love my job and my students, and I'm glad I fought for it. They say academia is the Game of Thrones without the beheadings. Fair, I think. The next story is titled, Idiot Neighbor Eavesdrops and I Win. My neighbor is an idiot, and we have been having issues with her from the start. 6-hour relentless dog barking 4 days a week for years, yelling at me for stealing water flowing downhill, dead rabbit on the doorstep, the usual property line arguments, emptying her toxic hot tub onto our property, lying by the hedges to spy on us, parties, noise, etc. ad nauseum. Just run-of-the-mill bad neighbor stuff. Eventually we built a giant fence and it had kept the ball cap to a minimum. Both yards have plenty of mature trees. We have 3 maples over 150 years old and a nearly 100-year-old birch, a 12-foot cedar hedge. Add that to the giant fence and daylight is at a minimum in our backyard in the summer. Idiot neighbor had 2 century-old trees and a very mature mulberry tree that hung over the fence in the only area that enjoys direct sunlight. Now, this part is entirely our fault. One spring we built a patio there with light gray stone. The mulberry tree has dark purple fruit and hers is extremely prolific. The week construction was finished was the week the berries ripened and began to drop in the slightest breeze. Sitting out there for any length of time and you would be pelted with berries leaving purple stains like you were shot with a paintball, and sweeping a path was the only way to not step on them. If this only lasted for a few weeks, it would be tolerable, but mulberries are in season all summer. The number of birds that feasted on the fruit and promptly deposited bright purple bird crap on everything we owned outside was unbelievable. Purple bird crap drip-dried everywhere on the patio and beyond. We started putting tarps over the entire patio to collect the bird dung-coated berries and emptying them into a bucket every time we wanted to use the patio. Remembering our neighbor's penchant for eavesdropping, I began to talk about mulberry wine. About how good my mulberry wine was, and how this year's bumper crop of mulberries was going to make so much wine, and how we were going to go on a vacation with all the money I was making from selling my mulberry moonshine. Visitors joined in the act, claiming they could not wait for their allotment of my fabulous mulberry wine, and offering bribes to be moved up the list. I do not make mulberry wine, never have, and would not start with mulberry bird poop wine. One rainy early summer night, I heard and felt a tremendous crash. I ran into the backyard. The largest limb from the mulberry tree was lying in my backyard. A chainsaw was sputtering on the other side of my giant fence. The mulberry tree was coming down at night in a rainstorm. More evidence of her idiocy. There was a bit of yelling back and forth through the fence, me about her being a dangerous moron, and her to me about having a nice vacation without having mulberry wine to sell. She continued to cut down the whole tree instead of just the limbs hanging over our property. I laughed myself into the house, not quite believing my ruse worked so well and revenge was finally mine, but that poor tree died needlessly. Barely a month later, a vicious storm blew through our area, splitting one of her mature trees in half and damaging the other so badly it had to be removed. Now, the idiot has no trees, but all mine are still standing. The next story is titled, My Neighbor Constructed an Unlawful House on a Small Plot Adjacent to My Property, Causing Damage to My Driveway. Growing up in a small town, I had always been taught to be kind and respectful to my neighbors, and for the most part, I had always gotten along well with the people who lived near me. But when a new neighbor moved in next door, things took a turn for the worse. The property next to mine had always been a small vacant lot, too small to build a house on, but big enough for a garden or a small shed. I had always enjoyed the open space and the view of the trees beyond the lot. However, my new neighbor had other plans. He was a single guy in his 30s, and he seemed to be the kind of person who always wanted to stand out. When he first moved in, he came over to introduce himself, and I welcomed him to the neighborhood. However, I soon realized that he was not going to be an easy neighbor to deal with. One day, I looked out my window and saw that he had started to build a tree house on the small lot next to my property. At first, I thought it was kind of cute, and I didn't mind it too much. However, as he continued to work on it, I realized he was building it higher and higher until it was towering over my yard, blocking my view of the trees. I asked him if he had a permit to build the treehouse, and he just laughed and said that he didn't need one. He told me that he was building it for his niece, who he said loved to climb trees. However, I soon realized that he had built it more for himself than for his niece. He would often climb up there with a book or a beer, and he would sit there for hours, enjoying the view that he had stolen from me. I tried to reason with him, but he wasn't interested in listening. He told me that it was his property, and he could do whatever he wanted with it. I felt like I was hitting a brick wall. Days turned into weeks, and my neighbor's treehouse grew taller and taller until it was like a tower in the sky, blocking my view of the sunsets and the trees that I loved so much. I grew angrier with each passing day, but I didn't know what to do. I felt helpless and frustrated, and I couldn't even enjoy my own backyard anymore. One day, when I was coming home from work, I saw that he had installed a zip line from his treehouse to the edge of my property. I couldn't believe it. He was basically turning my yard into his personal playground. I was furious. I decided to take action. I contacted the town's zoning office and reported him for building an illegal structure without a permit. I also told them about the zip line and how it was invading my property. They sent an inspector over to investigate, and sure enough, the treehouse was illegal. My neighbor was given a fine, and he was ordered to take it down. However, he was not going to go down without a fight. He started arguing with the inspector and saying that it wasn't fair. He also told me that he was going to sue me for ruining his treehouse. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, but I knew that I had to stand my ground. I hired a lawyer and prepared for a legal battle. In the end, the case went to court and my neighbor lost. He was forced to take down the treehouse and pay a hefty fine. He was also ordered to stay away from my property and not to harass me anymore. I thought that the nightmare was over, but little did I know that there was more trouble to come. A few months after the legal battle, my neighbor started acting strange. He would often glare at me whenever I walked by his property, and I would hear him muttering under his breath. I tried my best to ignore him and go about my business, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. One day, I came home from work and saw that my yard was in disarray. My lawn had been torn up, and my flower beds had been trampled. It looked like someone had driven a heavy vehicle through my yard and destroyed everything in its path. I immediately suspected my neighbor, but I had no proof. I contacted the police, and they investigated the incident, but they couldn't find any evidence to link my neighbor to the destruction of my property. I was devastated. I had spent years cultivating my yard and creating a beautiful outdoor space, and now it was all destroyed. I didn't know what to do. But then, something miraculous happened. My community rallied around me, and people from all over town came to help me fix up my yard. They brought plants and flowers and helped me replant everything. It was a beautiful sight to see, and it made me realize how much I loved my town and the people in it. It's been a few years since the incident with my former neighbor, and I thought that everything was behind me. However, I recently received a letter in the mail that changed everything. The letter was from a law firm, and it stated that my former neighbor had filed a lawsuit against me for intentional infliction of emotional distress. According to the lawsuit, my neighbor claimed that my actions had caused him severe emotional distress, and he was seeking damages for the harm that I had caused him. I was shocked and confused. I had no idea what he was talking about. As far as I knew, I had done nothing to intentionally harm him. I contacted my lawyer, and we started to investigate the matter. It turned out that my former neighbor had moved to another state, but he had kept tabs on me through social media. He had seen that I had moved to a new town and had started a new business, and he believed that I had done so with the intention of hurting him. It was ridiculous, but he had apparently become fixated on the idea that I was out to get him. He had spent years building up this delusion in his mind, and he was now seeking revenge for a perceived slight. The lawsuit was a complete surprise, and I was not sure how to proceed. However, with the help of my lawyer, we were able to build a strong defense against his claims. We provided evidence that showed that I had not intentionally harmed him, and that he was the one who had caused the trouble in the first place. The case went to court, and it was a long and arduous process. My former neighbor was determined to get his revenge, and he fought tooth and nail to win the case. However, in the end, justice prevailed and the judge ruled in my favor. My former neighbor was ordered to pay for all the legal fees and damages that he had caused. It was a victory for me, but it was also a reminder of how fragile our sense of security can be. I never could have imagined that a simple dispute with a neighbor would turn into such a long and drawn-out legal battle. However, I also learned that when faced with adversity, it's important to stay strong and to fight for what's right. The experience made me more aware of my rights and more determined to protest them. As for my former neighbor, I hope that he finds peace and can move on from his obsession with me. I harbor no ill will towards him, and I hope that he can find a way to live a happy and fulfilling life. The last story is titled, My Mom Gave Me Up for $2,500. So, backstory, my mom and dad split up when I was roughly 9 or 10 years old due to my mother cheating on my father when he was out of the country. He's a pilot. At the time, it was me and my 2 older sisters, one of which was already an adult, so my older sister and I were left under my mother's custody due to my father always flying and not wanting us to go through moving all the time. As far as the details go, my dad not only paid my mom child support, but also paid off the house. Despite having little money to take care of himself, he paid my mom more than what he actually owed. Yet, My sister and I never saw that money. After the divorce, my mom turned to many things, sleeping around, gambling, drinking, and eventually meth, though that didn't last long due to my dad finding out and threatening to take us away. My sister practically became my mother since ours decided to step down from the plate, and I was too young to take care of myself. When my sister left for college, all the emotional abuse she took ended up falling on me, which sent me into a loop. Due to my sister taking all the damage, I typically saw my mother as, well, my mother. My young brain didn't notice how often she didn't come home at night, or the lack of food in the house, or the constant weeks I'd wear one outfit since I didn't have other clothes that fit. I didn't notice how not normal this is. Heading into high school, it became more and more obvious this wasn't right at all, yet I still loved my mother. We bantered and ate fast food together, and she was proud of my accomplishments. But she had her moments, dropping huge hints that I'm too boyish like my dad, refusing to let me cut my hair, pressuring me into wearing makeup, heels, dresses, convincing me I don't need therapy as my therapist at the time made me uncomfortable, one of those Christian therapists that made everything about God. While I am a Christian, it didn't help the conversation, and so on. Meanwhile, my dad met a woman, and they fell in love. When she became pregnant with his kid, he moved her to America after my little sister was born and started a new family. I love my stepmom. She's literally the sweetest woman I know, and I adore my baby sister, and eventually my second baby sister. Over time, after spending many nights in their home, I came to realize how much happier I was at their house over my mother's. One day, I told my dad I want to officially live with him. At this point in time, I've noticed how depressed I am and how things aren't normal in my mom's house. When I told my mother this, she was deeply upset and cried, but she understood, or so I thought. That's when everything went downhill. The text messages started, sly guilt trips and remarks on how someone else convinced me to move out, that my father convinced me she was the bad guy. The more these texts happened, the warier I became on talking to her. It got to the point where I would cry after every conversation because I was so confused and lost. One day she practically trapped me in her car in my best friend's driveway to tell me how my reasons for leaving her were bullcrap and that I clearly don't remember what it was like in that house. Cue my memory issues. But enough about that, let's get to the good part, the custody case. Due to me being the last child between my mother and father, my dad no longer had to pay child support. Obviously, they go to court about this. Except, my mom didn't show up for many, many hearings. When she did, she had this bullcrap story about how my dad owed her a crapload of money because he never paid the full child support, and how she felt pressured to believe him and trust him when he said he knew how much he owed her. He did. He calculated it himself and actually paid more than what was needed. So, if you're catching on, this fight was about money. Here's a fun little thing. My mom texted me maybe a month before this case started about how she desperately wants me to come home, how she'll do anything to get her baby back. That aged well, didn't it? Because one day my mom stated that if my dad pays her $2,500, she'll give up full custody of me. My dad agreed to it and it was over. She gave up her custody rights for $2,500. It still stings. I'm still bitter and angry to this day about it, and this case happened years ago. I don't think my mom is aware I know the details on this case, as she very rarely reaches out to me as if we still have a relationship to tell me how much she loves and misses me. The thing is, I learned that my mom actually despised me after the divorce because I reminded her of my dad. We have the same eyes and resting face, lol. My mom just loves being the victim and even tried to convince my sister she doesn't remember doing all the stuff she did to us. She even blamed my dad for her cheating on him and said so to my face. I haven't had a real conversation with her since Christmas, over the phone of course, and haven't seen her in person since maybe before the pandemic. She texted me recently all excited about a gift she got for my sister's unborn baby, and it sent a whole new wave of resentment towards her. I stopped trying long ago to have a relationship with her as she doesn't try in return, and will continue to do so until she admits her wrongs, apologizes, and actually tries to be a ducking mother for once in her life. Until then, my only mother is my lovely stepmom. The next one is an entitled people's story. I was hired by a company as an assistant manager, a job for which I was well qualified. The owner was rarely on site as he owned several businesses. The company was run by a GM who hired me but worked mostly on the second shift, so I would have little daily contact with her since I was hired for the first shift. I was assigned to Eva for training. Eva was a manager and had been with the company for 5 years. I trained with her for a few days, and then I was on my own, though she and I had overlapping shifts and would see each other a few days a week. We were friendly but not close. After a few months, I was doing well at my job and had even gotten some new procedures adopted to help boost sales. Eva began to act resentful. She would correct me for small things and took any opportunity to remind me that she had trained me. It didn't matter to me. She wasn't my boss. I reported to the GM. So I mostly just ignored her. What I didn't know was that Eva was not just tight with the GM. They had worked together at another place for 10 years before this one. One day at shift end, the GM asked to talk to me. She told me it wasn't working out, said I was still making mistakes at 6 months that I shouldn't be. I asked for examples. A few of them were petty matters Eva had mentioned, but most of them were just not true. I tried to argue, but it was clear that I was set up. I decided to reach out to the owner since I had nothing to lose. He was sympathetic, but said he relied on the GM to run the business and had to support her decision. Then he mentioned that if things hadn't been so bad between me and Eva, it probably could have been worked out. That's when I knew she was behind my being fired from a job I needed, really liked, and was making great money, and I vowed to get revenge. I started searching for her online information. In less than an hour, I had uncovered gold thanks to one of those pay services. About 3 months prior, Eva was arrested and charged with DWI in a neighboring state. The court records showed she had a hearing coming up in a few weeks. That was enough to get her fired. It affects a professional license she and I had to have as management. Per state law, license holders must report criminal charges to the licensing board, and in the case of a DWI arrest, licenses are typically suspended pending trial. I called the owner and told him what I discovered. It was news to him. I guess since it was out of state, Eva was keeping it secret. Maybe she was hoping to get let off the charges. The next day, the owner called and said Eva was fired. He thanked me for telling him about her DWI, apologized for how I was fired, and offered me Eva's position and salary. He asked me to come in the next morning to meet with him and to cover Eva's shift. I accepted. That alone was sweetly satisfying revenge, but what happened next was the icing on the cake. I got to work extra early, met with the owner and GM, and we all agreed to start fresh. Cool. It was still an hour before opening, and I was in the back of the place when I heard the front door chime. When I came out a few minutes later, Eva was there, tears flowing, begging the owner for her job back. She obviously didn't know I was there because when she saw me, her whole body seized, and her shocked expression was priceless. I walked right by her, staring her down with a crafty grin, and went outside. Eva came out a minute later and wouldn't make eye contact. As she walked away, I said, "Good luck on the 23rd. That was her court date. Over the next few months, I flourished in my new role. I introduced several new strategies that improved sales and cut costs, and the owner was very pleased. I received a generous bonus for my efforts. One day, a few months later, I received a call from Eva. She was sobbing uncontrollably, begging me for forgiveness. I could hear the desperation in her voice. I was enjoying this, and so I told her that I had moved on, but that she should never underestimate someone's ability to get revenge. I hung up and went back to work, feeling satisfied that justice had been served. I knew that I had won, and that Eva would never be able to get the best of me again. The next one is an entitled People Story. My name is Lily, and I recently moved to a new neighborhood with my husband and our 2 children. The neighborhood was managed by a local HOA, but we were fortunate enough to have a house that fell outside the range of their control. We were excited to have more freedom than our neighbors, but little did we know that this would attract the attention of Karen, the self-appointed neighborhood police. Our first encounter with Karen was when we were unloading our moving truck. She came over to us, accusing us of being intruders and questioning who we were and what we were doing. Despite our attempts to explain our situation, she refused to listen and left us feeling uneasy and unwelcome. Over the next few weeks, Karen continued to make our lives difficult. She would leave HOA materials at our doorstep, issue us fines for minor grievances, and even called the police on us when our children were playing in our own backyard pool. It seemed like she was constantly watching us and waiting for us to slip up. One day, my husband and I decided to go to the local city hall to get more information about the HOA and why our house was exempt. We discovered that our house was built before the HOA was established, and therefore was not subject to their rules and regulations. Armed with this knowledge, we felt more empowered to stand up to Karen's harassment, but things only got worse. Karen started to spread rumors about us to our neighbors, telling them that we were troublemakers and didn't belong in the neighborhood. We tried to ignore her, but it was hard when we knew that she was turning our neighbors against us. Then one night, we were woken up by a loud banging on our front door. It was Karen, demanding that we let her in. We refused, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. She started to yell and threaten us, and we knew that we had to call the police. When the police arrived, Karen was still outside of our house, screaming and causing a scene. They arrested her for disorderly conduct, but we knew that this wouldn't be the end of it. A few days later, we received a letter in the mail from Karen's lawyer, threatening to sue us for harassment and emotional distress. We were shocked and scared, but we knew that we had done nothing wrong. We hired a lawyer ourselves, and after a long and stressful legal battle, the case was dismissed. But Karen wasn't done yet. One night, while we were sleeping, someone broke into our house and stole some of our belongings. We were devastated and scared. We suspected that it was Karen, but we couldn't prove it. The police investigation turned up no leads, and we were left feeling vulnerable and unsafe in our own home. We decided that we needed to move for the safety and well-being of our family. Thankfully, we were able to find a new home in a different neighborhood. We've been here for a few months now, and we feel much happier and more at peace. We've learned a lot from our experience with Karen, and we're grateful that we were able to stand up for ourselves and come out stronger on the other side. And as for Karen, we've heard through the grapevine that she was eventually forced to move out of the neighborhood after too many complaints from her neighbors. We can only hope that she's learned something from this experience and that she'll never treat anyone else the way she treated us. The next one is a petty revenge story. So, my dear old mother has been my personal hell for as long as I can remember. It started with her threatening to hit me with a bottle, then trying to break down my door while screaming obscenities at me. She even hit me over the head with an umbrella and yelled at me when I cried. I was 11 at the time. She blamed me for my sister's divorce, which happened when I was 6. For years, left for 3 months without warning, and then acted entitled to my forgiveness when she came back. She's thrown things at me, broken 3 TVs, and called me a myriad of names, ranging from mild things like useless waste of space to actual curses. The worst thing is that she acts like she's the best mom in existence around other people. She compliments me and stuff, and I can't have a support system because no one would believe me if I told them how awful she is. But I've had an ace up my sleeve for 2 years now. I've secretly recorded videos and audios of every horrible moment and kept them in a safe folder. I have recordings of the moments mentioned above and lots more of her talking crap about neighbors, friends, and even her own eldest child behind their back. Tonight, I'm packing for uni. By morning, the entire folder will reach multiple people, including my half-siblings, aunts, uncles, neighbors, her besties, etc. Bad luck and a worse day, Mother. You always said justice is better served cold. The next one is a petty revenge story. Mother-in-law has always been bitter that I took her son away from her. She's the queen of negging, and I am often her #1 target. She loves to make me jealous. She sends pictures of her new cars, new house, and designer handbags saying, "Isn't it great I can afford all this?" Last summer, mother-in-law invited her other son, his girlfriend, and the girlfriend's sister on vacation, but not us. She bought them designer souvenirs and sent us pictures every day of their vacation, captioned, "I bet you're so jealous." Not 3 months later, my parents invited us on their vacation, and we accepted. Mother-in-law was furious. Jealousy is not a good look on her. She threw a tantrum, saying she was losing her little boy and that she wanted to be the best mom in the world. She was so jealous that my mother was getting more attention than her. She cried about how she never sees us and how we've always shown blatant favoritism toward my parents. The best part of all this? It was at this moment that my significant other decided to tell her that we are moving 5 hours away to my parents' city. The next one is a pro-revenge story. What's better than calling the cops on your sweet little old neighbor's heroin addict grandson for stealing your Amazon package? In July, my elderly neighbor had her grandson and pregnant girlfriend move in to help them out. She is a widowed lady in her 70s, babbles a lot, but sweet. I have a soft spot for her. Years ago, she cornered me as I was leaving to take my dog on a walk. My dog was unhappily pacing, waiting for the walk while we listened to her stories. He peed on her during the story. She is so senile she didn't notice. Just a few days later, I am mowing my backyard, and the grandson walks past my house carrying an Amazon envelope. Weird. An hour later, the sweet little old lady comes over with the envelope her grandson had. This was in my landscaping. I had totally forgotten that I ordered my kids the movie Leap. What a crap haul for this kid. See, I am a criminal defense attorney. Probably the only one this lady knows. If I call the cops, my neighbor will try to hire me. It'll get weird. She is so sweet. I will be a witness. He is on probation, so he will sit in jail for a while. This will totally make me look like a snitch to my own clients in that same jail who are thieves, addicts, and burglars. It's bad personally and professionally, and it's not the biggest deal. So I filled up an Amazon box with purple rain powder that was ordered to my office. A dry dye that gets darker and spreads when it comes into contact with your sweat. That lasts a week on your skin. Think leaking pen times 50. Why? I want to shame him, and it won't come back on me. He's not going to call the cops for stealing my crap. He isn't going to tell his grandma he stole from me. And if it makes a mess in her house, it's still cheaper for her than hiring a lawyer and paying her grandson's court costs and fines. Yep, the package was gone in 20 minutes. I walked past the home, screams of anger at the pregnant girlfriend. This crap won't come off. It's all over my grandma's house. Priceless. The following day, I gave him the head nod as he smoked a cigarette in a hoodie in July. He ran inside. Then I taught my kids to yell Smurf when we walked past. No snitching, just shame. The next one is an entitled people story. First-time poster here, and I'm still in awe of the audacity of some people. I've read about entitled people, but outside of my school, I've never been in contact with any of them long enough to deal with them. That was until recently. Also, forgive me for any grammatical errors as I am writing on my tablet. I, 33M, am an ELA teacher based in China for the last 3.5 years. First, a little bit of information before I get to the story. There is a bit of a pay gap between foreign and Chinese teachers. It's also a well-known fact, but only the most opportunistic ones like to capitalize on it from time to time, if you're not careful. It can be anything from charging more at stands to, on the rarest of rare occasions, guilting them into complying. Trust me, it has happened, and those select few are not apologetic about it. Now, on to the story. It was Chinese New Year, and I was on the train to Chongqing to visit a friend. I don't like flying, and I really like trains. I had my Samsung Tab S8 Plus, and I was watching Final Fantasy Van Advent Children with my Bluetooth. Suddenly, I felt something nudging against me. I looked to see a kid, maybe in elementary, trying to look at the movie. So, I turned off my Bluetooth and turned the tablet on to him so he could watch. Sounds weird, but being a teacher here, you get used to it. Anyway, he was really immersed, and though I couldn't understand him, I could tell that he was enjoying it a lot. He was trying to talk to me, but his English wasn't so good, and my Chinese was worse, so he opted for I like this, so cool, me too, and things like that. Very basic English. He was a sweet kid, and he got to watch the whole thing before our stop. He even said Chongqing, and I said me too. He waved goodbye and ran back to his mom, and I began to pack my things so I could get off. Then ... IT happened. A woman approached me with the kid, and in perfect English demanded my tablet. She literally said, "Give me your tablet." I thought I was in the Twilight Zone and wanted to ensure I heard her correctly. "Excuse me? Give me your tablet. I wanted my son to have it." I refused, a simple no. And she said those magic words that I'd begun hating to hear. "But you're a foreigner. You can just buy another one." Now, a couple of things. One, I don't know if the kid really wanted my tablet or not, and frankly I didn't care. Two, I come from a family that has taught me to never let anyone make you feel less than others. If someone tries to take my dignity, it's not going to end well for that person. And no, I don't actually have to fight to get my point across. Fair warning, I'm paraphrasing the confrontation because it lasted a lot longer than I cared for. I said, "No, I can't. I had to save to buy this. You can do the same." "No, you can give yours and stop being selfish." Again, I countered, "Or you can stop being an entitled idiot and buy your own." It was my first time seeing a shocked Pikachu face, and to rub salt in the wound, I added, "Shoo, shoo!" She did go away, only to come back with the police. That I should have seen coming, but I didn't because I was focused on getting off the train. Lucky for me, he also spoke English fluently. He was also really polite and, obviously, not in the mood for any of it. "Sir, this woman says you stole her tablet." I saw the woman behind him with a triumphant smirk while speaking Chinese. I let out a sigh. I had already wasted enough time on this nonsense. So I did what I always did when I wanted to get my point across in the quickest way possible. I turned cold. In fact, my students refer to it as me turning into Bing Yaoshi, ice teacher. I looked at the police officer and said, "I'll make a deal with you. I'm going to use my fingerprint to unlock this tablet. If it doesn't work, she can have it. If it does work, I get to bash her face in." That woman's Pikachu face came back so fast that the officer even had a shocked look. He asked me if I was serious, and I said, "Definitely." I guess the woman saw my face and tried to backpedal, but I wasn't going to let her go until I made my point. When she tried to leave, I said, "Where are you going? I thought you said this was yours." The woman looked to the police for help, but as I said, he was not in the mood and just spoke as she was. She said something in Chinese to the man, only for the man to give a short reply. I guess he wasn't going to entertain this and make sure I didn't hit her. "How dare you? You had the nerve to try to take something that's mine because I'm a foreigner. You're disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself." The woman had a mixture of fear, shock, and anger on her face when I finally asked, "Is this your tablet?" When the woman said no, I leaned my head in towards her and barked, "What was that?" She finally said that the tablet was mine before taking her kid and leaving. The kid did wave goodbye to me despite his mother's objections, and I smiled and waved back. The officer asked me if I was serious about hurting her, and I told him the truth. I wouldn't have hit a woman over an object. He laughed and wished me a happy Chinese New Year. I told my friend about this, and we had a good laugh about it. The next one is an entitled parents story. My 28M stepmother, 49F, is a wannabe party planner. She has taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humored her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane, 26F, in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple of months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, etc., and we have repeatedly asked her to stop. Dad wants us to humor her, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, 4M, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me Dad and refers to us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like a son. Stepmother, though, hates Luke. She accuses Jane of baby-trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and CL usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my BIL was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, stepmother screaming, and Dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then hit Luke, and he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Jane and I are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. The last one is an entitled people story. I knew a lady who was going through a divorce. I was her tech person when she had a home business, and I was invited to her 40th birthday party. She wanted a new TV plus sound system hooked up and needed my car because the TV would not fit in hers. We went together to pick up the TV, and while she went shopping for food, her ex saw us together. I am married and only helped this person. I hooked up her TV, and after the party, I helped clean up when her friends left. Her ex heard from her friends that I stayed after the party ended. A few weeks later, she asked me to set up a GPS for her car. It was a hot day, and her home's air conditioner had stopped working. I went there and knocked on the door, but she did not answer. I heard the car running in the garage and went back to the door to look in the front window. The house was full of smoke, and I found her passed out on the couch. I picked her up and took her outside. She was breathing and coughing. I went back in, and she had left the car running, with the window down to make the air conditioner cool the house down by the internal access door to the garage. This filled the house with carbon monoxide, which almost killed her. I turned off the car, opened up all the windows and doors, and comforted her. If I had arrived a few minutes later, she would have been dead. She was crying outside because she almost died, and if she had, people would think she deliberately killed herself instead of it being a mistake. At that moment, the ex drove past on one of his stalking runs. Later, I saw him picking up his kids from school, and he called me a cheating prick, which surprised me because we got along before they broke up. He had already been spreading rumors to everyone that I was sleeping with her. He told his whole family, her family, and eventually got to my family. I didn't do anything wrong, and when I told them what really happened, nobody believed me. Everyone believed him that something was happening before they broke up. Then he made up extra reasons to say she was with me. Oddly, my wife is the person who laughed it off because she doesn't believe I would ever cheat on her, especially with that woman. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.